Jake Morrison walked through the massive doors of the Grand Galactic Council chambers. The doors were 50 feet tall and made of some kind of blue metal that seemed to glow from within. Had been through these doors many times before, but the sight still amazed him. The chamber was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen back on Earth. The chamber was round and went up so high that Jake could barely see the ceiling. Rows of seats went around the walls in circles, getting higher and higher. Each section was built for different kinds of alien species. Some seats were for creatures that needed water to breathe. Others had special lights for beings that lived in darkness. The air smelled strange, like a mix of metal and flowers and something he could not name. Jake wore a simple black suit with a white shirt and blue tie. On his chest was a small pin showing the Earth flag. He carried no weapons. No gun, no knife, no energy shield, nothing. His hands were empty, except for a tablet computer that held his notes for today's meeting. As he walked to his seat in the human section, Jake looked around at the other ambassadors. They were all heavily armed, just like always. The Zephyrians looked like giant lizards that walked on two legs. Their ambassador, Vexther, had metal claws attached to his hands. The claws could shoot out beams of hot plasma that could cut through steel. On his back, he wore a device that could create an energy shield around his whole body. The Chitara Collective sent their usual representative, Kratel. Looked like a huge insect, about 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and 6 legs. Her skin was shiny black, like a beetle. From her hands came long stingers that could shoot electricity. When she was angry, blue sparks would dance around her fingers. Her head was covered with a helmet that could shoot sonic blasts loud enough to break glass. Near the center of the chamber sat the Vorten delegation. They were made of living crystal and looked like walking diamonds. Their bodies could change shape and create sharp edges that were sharper than any blade. They could also make sounds so high that other species could not hear them. But the sounds could shatter bones. The Algarian war chief, Grokmer, was there too. He was 12 feet tall and covered in thick gray skin that was harder than armor. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and his hands ended in claws that could tear through metal. He wore a belt with weapons that Jake did not recognize, but they all looked deadly. Every single species in the chamber carried weapons or had natural weapons built into their bodies. Every species except humans. Ouch. Jake was the only one in the entire chamber who could be hurt by a simple punch or kick. He was the only one who could be killed by a fall or by choking on his food. He was the weakest creature in the room, and everyone knew it. Jake took his seat and opened his tablet. Now, today's meeting was supposed to be simple. They were going to talk about trade routes between the human colonies and the Zephyrian mining worlds. It should have been boring and peaceful. The meeting started with the usual ceremony. Each ambassador stood and spoke their species' traditional greeting. When it was Jake's turn, he simply said, "Greetings from Earth and all human colonies. We come in peace and friendship." Some of the alien ambassadors made sounds that Jake knew were laughs. To them, a human talking about peace while being completely defenseless was either very brave or very stupid. Council Elder Zorthok was so old that no one remembered what species he originally was, called the meeting to order. His voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We will begin with trade discussions between the Terran Federation and the Zephyrian Republic." Jake stood up to present the human proposal. The plan was fair and would help both species. Humans would provide food and medical supplies to the Zephyrian mining colonies. In return, the Zephyrians would give humans access to rare metals that Earth needed for building spaceships. But before Jake could finish speaking, Vexther interrupted him. "The human proposal is an insult," he hissed. His voice sounded like steam escaping from a pipe. "You offer us scraps while asking for our most valuable resources." Jake remained calm. "Ambassador Vexther, if you look at Section 3 of the proposal, you'll see that we're offering medical supplies that could save thousands of lives in your mining colonies. The metal we're asking for represents less than 2% of your total production." Vexther's eyes turned bright red, which Jake knew meant he was getting angry. "Do not lecture me about percentages, human. Your kind has been in space for only 3 years. My people have been mining these worlds for 3,000 years. From across the chamber, Kretel made a clicking sound with her mandibles. Perhaps. The Zephyrians are afraid of fair competition, she said. Her voice sounded like multiple people talking at the same time. The Chitara Collective would be happy to trade with the humans on better terms. Now both Vexler and Kretel were angry. This was not good. Jake had seen arguments between these two species before, and they always ended badly. Vexler stood up and turned toward Kretel. The Chitara speak of fair trade while they steal resources from every world they touch. Your hive mind thinks. It can take whatever it wants. Kretel also stood up. Sparks began to dance around her stingers. We take only what we need to survive. Unlike the Zephyrians, who hoard wealth while their own people suffer in the mines, the tension in the chamber was growing. Other ambassadors were reaching for their weapons. The Voritons began to change shape, making their bodies more angular and dangerous-looking. The Algarians started making low growling sounds. Vexler activated his plasma claws. Bright orange energy formed around his metal talons. Ow. I have heard enough insults from the bug people. Kretel raised her stingers and electricity began to arc between them. Then perhaps it is time to teach the lizards some manners. It's about to become a fight. In the council chambers, fights between armed ambassadors could kill dozens of beings and destroy years of peace treaties. Jake knew he had to do something. He stood up and walked calmly toward the center of the chamber. He moved slowly and kept his hands visible and empty. Every eye in the chamber was on him. Here was the weakest being in the room, walking straight into a fight between two heavily armed species. Ambassador Vexler, Ambassador Kretel, Jake said in a quiet voice. May I suggest something? Both aliens turned to look at him. Vexler's claws were still glowing with deadly energy. Kretel's stingers were still crackling with electricity. They could both kill Jake in less than a second. You are brave human, Vexler said, but this does not concern your kind. Actually, it does, Jake replied. He walked closer until he was standing right between the two angry ambassadors. You're fighting about trade with humans, so it concerns us very much. Jake turned to face both of them. Vexler, your people need medical supplies. Kretel, your people need rare metals for your technology. Humans need partners we can trust. What if we made a three-way deal? The chamber was completely silent. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Jake continued talking in the same calm voice. The Chitara have the best medical technology in the galaxy. The Zephyrians have the best mining operations. Humans have the largest food production systems. Instead of fighting over who gets what, why don't we share? Vexler looked confused. His claws were still active, but he was listening.
What?
You mean share? I mean, we all get what we need, Jake explained. The Chitara provide medical technology to Zephyrian mining colonies. The Zephyrians provide rare metals to Chitara worlds. Humans provide food to both species. Everyone wins. Kretel's stingers stopped sparking. This is possible? It's more than possible, Jake said. It's better than possible. It's profitable for everyone. Slowly, Vexler deactivated his plasma claws. Kretel lowered her stingers. The other ambassadors in the chamber relaxed and put away their weapons. We will consider this proposal, Vexler said. As will the collective, Kretel agreed. Jake smiled and walked back to his seat. The meeting continued peacefully, and by the end of the day, they had the framework for a trade agreement that would benefit all three species. As the other ambassadors filed out of the chamber, many of them looked at Jake with something like respect, or maybe it was fear. He had just done something that none of them could have done. He had stopped a fight without using any weapons at all. But the question remained. Why were humans the only species allowed to enter the council chambers? Unarmed? And why did that make them more effective, not less? Jake Morrison sat in his quarters after the successful trade meeting. His room was small but comfortable, with a window that showed the stars outside the station. He was tired, but happy. The three-way trade deal would help millions of beings. Across 3 different species, a soft chime came from his door. Come in, Jake said. The door opened, and Council Elder Zorthok entered. The old being moved slowly, using a walking stick made of some kind of white metal. No one knew exactly what Zorthok looked like under his long robes, but his eyes were ancient and wise. "You did well today, Ambassador Morrison," Zorthok said. His voice was like distant thunder. "You prevented a war with nothing but words." "You, Elder," Jake replied. "But I was just doing my job." Zorthok made a sound that might have been laughter. "Just your job, young human? Do you know how many armed ambassadors have tried to stop fights in these chambers? Hundreds. Do you know how many succeeded without bloodshed? Very few." Jake offered the Elder a chair, but Zorthok preferred to stand. "Elder, may I ask you something that has been bothering me?" "Of course." "Why are humans the only species allowed to enter the council chambers without weapons? Every other species comes armed. Some have natural weapons, others carry devices. But humans are expected to come with nothing. Why?" Zorthok was quiet for a long moment. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "That is a story worth telling," he said finally. "It begins 3 years ago when your species first came to our galaxy." The Elder sat down heavily in the chair. "Do you remember Admiral Kate Phillips?" Jake nodded. "She led the first human contact mission. She's a hero back on Earth. She's a hero here too, though she may not know it," Zorthok said. "Let me tell you what really happened during first contact." The Elder closed his eyes and began to speak. As he talked, Jake could almost see the events happening. 3 years ago, human fleet appeared at the edge of Galactic Council space. The ships were small compared to most alien vessels, but they moved in perfect formation. The lead ship sent a simple message: "We are humans from the planet Earth. We come in peace and wish to learn about your civilization." The Council had dealt with new species before. Most came either as conquerors or as victims running from some disaster. But humans seemed different. They did not demand anything. They did not threaten anyone. They just asked to talk. Admiral Kate Phillips came aboard the Council station with a small team. Dr. Ben Clark, a scientist who studied alien life, came with her. So did a few other officers and diplomats. When they were told about the Council's weapons protocol, Admiral Phillips looked confused. "You want us to bring weapons to a peace meeting?" she asked. The Council representatives explained that all species carried weapons for mutual respect and protection. It showed that each species was strong and should be taken seriously. It was tradition, you understand? Admiral Phillips said politely. "But humans prefer to negotiate without weapons. We find that weapons make people nervous and more likely to fight instead of talk." The alien representatives thought this was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid. A species that refused to arm itself was either so powerful that it did not need weapons, or so weak that weapons would not help anyway. They decided to test the humans. The first test was simple. During the humans' first official council meeting, Algerine accidentally knocked over a heavy table near the human delegation. The table weighed over 1,000 pounds and could have crushed any human it hit. Instead of panicking or running, Dr. Clark calmly stepped aside and helped the Algarian lift the table back up. "No harm done," he said with a smile. "These things happen." The second test was more dangerous. A Vorten ambassador lost control of his shape-changing abilities and created several sharp crystal spikes near the humans. Any normal species would have drawn weapons and prepared to fight. Admiral Phillips simply moved her people to a safe distance and waited patiently for the Vorten to regain control. Then she walked over and asked if he needed medical help. "Shape-changing looks very difficult," she said. "You must need a lot of practice to do it safely." The tests got more and more dangerous. Weapons were accidentally fired near the humans. Energy shields malfunctioned and created dangerous electrical fields. Toxic gases were accidentally released in areas where humans were walking. Every time the humans stayed calm, they helped clean up messes. They offered medical aid to anyone who was hurt. They never got angry, never demanded apologies, never threatened anyone. They just kept being helpful and polite. The other species began to think that humans were too stupid to understand they were being threatened. So they decided to try one final test. They staged a mock battle in the council chambers. The Zephyrians, Chitara, Vortons, and Elgarians all pretended to have a massive fight. Weapons were firing everywhere. Energy shields were crackling. The air was full of the sounds of battle. In the middle of all this chaos, the humans sat calmly. At their table, they did not run. They did not hide. They did not call for help. Admiral Phillips just watched the battle with interest, like she was watching a movie. When the fake fight was over, she stood up and started clapping. "That was amazing," she said. "You all worked together so well. It looked like a real battle, but no one got hurt. You must have practiced that for months." The alien ambassadors were stunned. The humans had not only survived the test, they had seen right through it. They knew it was fake the whole time. Dr. Clark walked over to examine some of the weapon burns on the walls. "These energy patterns are fascinating," he said. "Could you show me how your weapons create these effects? The science behind them must be incredible." That was when the council realized something important. The humans were not too stupid to understand danger. They were too smart to be fooled by fake danger. And they were curious about everything, even weapons that had just been used to threaten them. Over the next few weeks, more incidents happened around the humans. But now the council was paying attention to how the humans dealt with real problems. It's not fake ones. When a power failure left part of the station in darkness, humans helped guide other species to safety using simple flashlights. When a food poisoning outbreak affected several species, human doctors worked day and night to help, even though they could not get sick from the same germs. When pirates attacked a supply convoy near the station, Admiral Phillips offered to help hunt them down. She did this even though human ships were much smaller and weaker than alien warships. "We may not have the biggest guns," she said, "but we're good at solving problems." The humans were not just surviving in a dangerous galaxy. They were making it a safer place for everyone. But the most important moment came during a real emergency. A reactor failure threatened to destroy an entire section of the station. The area had to be evacuated, but someone needed to stay behind to manually shut down the reactor. It was a suicide mission. Volunteers from every species stepped forward, but they all needed special equipment to survive the radiation. The equipment would take hours to prepare, and the reactor would explode in minutes. Dr. Clark volunteered. "To go without equipment, humans can survive radiation longer than most species," he said. "I can probably live long enough to shut it down." He was lying. Humans were actually more fragile than most species when it came to radiation. But he went anyway. Dr. Clark managed to shut down the reactor and save the station. The radiation poisoning almost killed him, but alien doctors were able to heal him using their advanced medical technology. When he woke up in the hospital, representatives from every species were waiting to thank him. They asked him why he had lied about human radiation resistance. "I did not want you to stop me from trying," he said simply. "Someone had to save the station. It might as well be me." That was when the council understood what made humans different. They were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But they were willing to risk everything to help others, even people they had just met. The council voted to grant humans full membership that same day, and they created a special rule just for humans. Since humans seemed to do their best work when they were not armed, they would be allowed to enter council chambers without weapons. It was not a privilege, Zorthok told Jake. It was recognition. That humans are most dangerous when they appear most harmless. Jake sat quietly, thinking about everything the elder had told him. "So that's why other species respect unarmed humans?" "Respect and fear," Zorthok corrected. "Any species can learn to use bigger weapons, but only humans have learned to turn their weaknesses into strengths. That makes you unpredictable. And unpredictable beings change the galaxy." The elder stood up slowly. "Sleep well, Ambassador Morrison. Tomorrow you will need that human unpredictability." Again, as Zorthok left, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what challenges tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Jake Morrison was eating breakfast in the station's main dining hall when Commander Ryan Scott sat down across from him. Ryan was a human military officer who worked with the Council's security forces. His job was to study different species and how they fought. "Heard you stopped another war yesterday," Ryan said, putting down his tray of food. Jake smiled. Just did some negotiating. It's nothing special. That's what you always say, Ryan replied. But the other species don't think it's normal. Getting questions about you all morning. What kind of questions? Ryan leaned forward and lowered his voice. They want to know how you do it. How you can walk into a room full of armed killers and make them listen to you. Some of them think you have secret weapons or special powers. Jake laughed. Secret powers? I'm just a guy from Ohio who used to sell insurance before I became a diplomat. That's what I told them, Ryan said. But they don't believe me. They think humans are hiding something. Just then, Dr. Amy Rodriguez joined them at the table. She was a psychologist who helped humans deal with the stress of living among alien species. Her specialty was understanding how different species thought and behaved. Are you two talking about yesterday's incident? She asked. Ryan thinks the aliens believe we have superpowers, Jake said. Amy shook her head. It's not superpowers they're worried about. Something much more dangerous. What do you mean? Jake asked. Think about it, Amy explained. Every species in the galaxy evolved with natural weapons. Zephyrians have claws and thick skin. Chitara have stingers and electrical abilities. The Vortons can change their bodies into weapons. The Algarians are living tanks. She pointed to Jake with her fork. But humans, we don't have claws or fangs or venom or armor. We can't breathe underwater or see in the dark or lift cars with our bare hands. We're weak and soft and slow. Thanks for the confidence boost, Jake said sarcastically. But that's exactly the point, Amy continued. Because we evolved without natural weapons, we had to learn to use everything else as weapons. Rocks, sticks, fire, tools, our brains. We learned to turn anything into a weapon. Ryan nodded slowly. I see what you mean. The other species think with their weapons first. Claws, stingers, plasma cannons. But humans think with their environment first. Exactly. Amy said, when a Zephyrian sees a problem, he thinks about how to use his claws to solve it. When a human sees a problem, he looks around and thinks about how to use everything nearby to solve it. Their conversation was interrupted when War Chief Grokmer approached their table. The massive Algarian had to bend down to avoid hitting. His head on the ceiling, his gray skin looked like stone, and his arms were bigger than Jake's entire body. Human Jake, Grokmer said in his deep, rumbling voice. I wish to speak with you. Jake looked up at the 12-foot-tall warrior. Course, War Chief, please sit down. Grokmer looked at the chair, which was much too small for him. Instead, he knelt on one knee so he could be closer to eye level with the humans. I have been thinking about yesterday, about how you stopped the fight between the lizard and the bug. It was just good negotiating, Jake said. No, Grokmer said firmly. It was something else. Something that my people do not understand. I wish to tell you a story. The war chief's expression became serious. 2 years ago, pirates attacked a human cargo ship near the Terran colonies. The ship was called the Peaceful Trader, and it carried only civilians. Farmers, teachers, children. No soldiers, no weapons, no military equipment. Jake had heard about this incident, but never got the full details. The pirates were Kravok raiders, Grokmer continued. Grofmerks are dangerous fighters. They have natural armor, poison claws, and no fear of death. 20 Kravok warriors attacked one human ship with 60 civilians. Amy and Ryan leaned forward to listen. The pirates thought it would be easy, Grokmer said. Humans are weak, they thought. Humans have no natural weapons. The Kravoks boarded the ship, expecting to kill everyone quickly. What happened? Asked, Druk_Moore's eyes grew wide. The humans did something impossible. They won. How? Jake asked. The Kravoks reported this to my people later, when we captured them, Grokmer explained. They said the humans used black magic and impossible weapons. But when we investigated, we learned the truth. The war chief counted on his massive fingers. The human farmers took apart their tractors and made electromagnets that stuck the Kravok warriors to the ship's metal walls. The teachers used the ship's water recycling system to flood the corridors with scalding steam. The children crawled through air vents and turned off life support in sections where the pirates were trapped. Jake's mouth fell open. turned farming equipment and school supplies into weapons. More than that, Grockmer said. The humans used the ship's food dispensers to create poison gas by mixing cleaning chemicals with cooking ingredients. They used the gravity generators to make some areas of the ship too heavy for the Kravoks to move. They even used the entertainment system to create sounds that confused the Kravok navigation systems. Amy whistled softly. They weaponized the entire ship. In 6 hours, Grack_Moore added. 6 hours, and 60 unarmed humans defeated 20 armed Kravak warriors using nothing but civilian equipment. Ryan shook his head in amazement. Incredible. The most incredible part, Grack_Moore continued, is that when we found the pirates, they were all still alive. The humans had knocked them unconscious, tied them up, and were giving them medical treatment for their injuries. They didn't kill them? Jake asked. Not one, Grack_Moore confirmed. Even though the Kravoks came to murder human children, the humans still tried to save their lives after defeating them. The war chief stood up slowly. This is when my people began to understand the truth about humans. You are not weak because you have no natural weapons. You are dangerous because you need no natural weapons. What do you mean? Amy asked. Grack_Moore gestured around the dining hall. Right now in this room, every other species sees tables, chairs, food, and eating utensils, but humans. Humans see weapons, tools, materials, and opportunities. Jake looked around the dining hall and realized Grack_Moore was right. Without thinking about it, Jake had already noticed that the table legs could be used as clubs, hot coffee could be thrown to distract an attacker, and the metal trays could be used as shields or cutting tools. You see it now, Grack_Moore said, watching Jake's expression. Your mind is always working, always thinking, always adapting. This is why the Council allows humans to be unarmed. Because an unarmed human is more creative than an armed alien. But why does that make us effective? Diplomats, Jake asked. Grack_Moore smiled, showing teeth that looked like daggers. Because when you walk into a room with no weapons, everyone else puts away their weapons too. They do this without thinking about it. Something about humans makes other species want to be peaceful. Is it because we look harmless? Ryan suggested. No. Grack_Moore said, it is because you act harmless while being deadly. This confuses us. We do not know how to respond to a species that is kind and dangerous at the same time. Dr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense from a psychological perspective. Most species are either predators or prey, but humans are both, can be gentle healers and vicious fighters in the same moment. My people have a saying, Grack_Moore said, beware the warrior who needs no weapon, for he has made the universe his arsenal. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Is that why some species are afraid of us? Not afraid, Grack_Moore corrected. Respectful. There is a difference. Fear makes you want to attack first. Respect makes you want to avoid fighting at all. And that's why human diplomats are so effective, Amy said, understanding. Other species don't want to fight us because they don't know what we might do next. Exactly, Grack_Moore agreed. When I fight another Elgarian, I know what weapons he has. When I fight a Zephyrian, I know to watch for his claws. When I fight a Chitara, I know to avoid the stingers. But when I think about fighting a human, I do not know what to expect, so I choose not to fight. Ryan laughed. So our weakness is actually our greatest strength? Your adaptability is your greatest strength, Grack_Moore corrected. Other species adapt their environment to fit their weapons. Humans adapt their weapons to fit their environment. The war chief prepared to leave. Human Jake, there is one more thing you should know. What's that? The Council has been watching your species very carefully for 3 years. We have learned that humans become more dangerous the more harmless they appear. This is why we trust you to be unarmed. Because we know that if you ever needed to be armed, you would find a way. Grack_Moore walked away, leaving the 3 humans sitting in stunned silence. So that's the secret, Jake said finally. We're not allowed to be unarmed because we're weak. We're allowed to be unarmed because we're unpredictable. And unpredictable. People make the best peacekeepers, Amy added. Because nobody wants to start a fight when they don't know how it will end. Jake looked around the dining hall again, seeing potential weapons and tools everywhere. For the first time, he truly understood why humans were different. They had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength, and the galaxy was still trying to figure out how they had done it. Tomorrow should be interesting, Ryan said with a grin. 2 days later, Jake Morrison was in his office working on trade reports when alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the hallways, and an automated voice announced, "Emergency situation in Section 7. All security. Personnel report immediately." Jake looked out his window and saw ships racing toward the station. These were not normal council ships. They were black and sleek, with weapons pointed at the station's docking bays. His communication device buzzed. "Ambassador Morrison, please report to the Emergency Command Center immediately." Jake ran through the corridors toward the command center. Along the way, he saw alien security forces moving quickly with their weapons ready. Everyone looked worried and tense. The Emergency Command Center was a large room filled with screens and control panels. High Arbiter Veleneth stood in the center, surrounded by military officers from different species. Veleneth was the supreme judge of the Galactic Council, and Jake had never seen him look so serious. "Ambassador Morrison," Veleneth said. When Jake arrived, "We have a crisis." On the main screen, Jake could see what was happening. A group of terrorists had taken over Section 7 of the station. They were holding 30 hostages in the section's main hall. The terrorists belonged to a group called the Pure Galaxy Movement that wanted to kick all humans out of council. Space. "How many terrorists?" Jake asked. 12, replied Captain Steve Mitchell, a human engineer who worked on the station. They're heavily armed with energy weapons and portable shields. They've sealed all the entrances and set up defensive positions. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, a human pilot who helped with station security, added more details. They've threatened to kill one hostage every hour until all humans leave council space permanently. "What species are the hostages?" Jake asked. "Mixed group," Steve replied, checking his tablet. "Zephyrians, Chitara, Vortons, even 2 Algarians. The terrorists don't seem to care who they hurt as long as they make their point." High Arbiter Veleneth turned to the assembled military officers. "What are our options?" A Zephyrian general stepped forward. "My assault teams can break through their defenses, but many hostages will die in the fighting." An Algarian commander nodded. "My warriors could smash through the barriers, but the space is too small. We would crush hostages by accident." A Chitara hive leader made clicking sounds. "We could use gas attacks to put everyone to sleep, but some hostage species cannot survive our sleep gases." Every solution the military experts suggested would result in dead hostages. The terrorist position was too strong, and the space was too confined for a normal rescue operation. "Sir," Jake said quietly, "may I make a suggestion?" All eyes turned to him. He was the only unarmed person in a room full of warriors and weapons experts. "Let me go in and talk to them," Jake said. The room erupted in protests. "Impossible. Dangerous. You'll be killed instantly." High Arbiter Veleneth raised his hand for silence. "Explain your thinking, Ambassador Morrison." "These terrorists want to prove that humans don't belong in council space," Jake said. "If I can show them that humans are here to help everyone, maybe I can change their minds," the Zephyrian general hissed. "They will shoot you the moment you enter their sight." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But right now, people are going to die every hour until we stop this. I'd rather risk one life than guarantee the deaths of 30 innocent beings." Lieutenant Brooks stepped forward. "Sir, if you're going in there, let me come with you." "I know the station's layout better than anyone." "No," Jake said firmly. "This has to be just me. If I bring backup, they'll think it's a trick." High Arbiter Veleneth studied Jake's face for a long moment. "What do you need?" "Access to the civilian areas of the station," Jake replied. "Maintenance tunnels, service corridors, anything that connects to Section 7. Captain Mitchell pulled up a station blueprint on his tablet. "There are 3 maintenance tunnels that lead near Section 7, but they're all sealed off by blast doors that the terrorists control." Jake studied the map carefully. "What about the waste recycling system?" "It connects to every section," Steve said, but the pipes are too small for a person to crawl through. I don't need to crawl through them, Jake said with a small smile. I just need to access them. Sarah looked confused. What are you planning? I'm going to use the station's own systems to solve this problem, Jake explained, just like humans always do. High Arbiter Velenith made his decision. Very well. Ambassador Morrison, you have 1 hour before we must try a military solution. Use it wisely. Jake nodded and left the command center with Steve and Sarah. They went first to the station's maintenance level, where all the pipes and cables that kept the station running were located. Okay, Jake said, looking around at the complex machinery. I need to understand how the station's systems work. Steve pointed to different areas. Water recycling over there, air circulation up there, power distribution along that wall, and waste processing down that corridor. What about the gravity generators? Jake asked. Bottom level, Sarah replied. They create artificial gravity for the whole station. Jake spent 20 minutes learning how everything connected. The station was like a giant machine, with hundreds of systems all working together. Water, air, power, waste, gravity, temperature control, communications, and more. Took a service elevator to the level just above where the terrorists were holding hostages. This area had shops, restaurants, and recreational facilities. It was empty now because of the emergency lockdown. Jake walked through the empty shops and restaurants, looking at everything with new eyes. To most people, these were just normal businesses. Yet to Jake, they were potential tools and weapons. In the kitchen of a restaurant, he'd found industrial-grade ovens, pressure cookers, liquid nitrogen for making fancy ice cream and chemicals. For cleaning, in a maintenance shop, he found welding equipment, metal cutting tools, and industrial adhesives. At a fitness center, he found exercise equipment that used electromagnetic resistance. In an art studio, he found materials that could conduct electricity or create chemical reactions when mixed together. What are you thinking? Steve asked, watching Jake examine everything. I'm thinking about systems, Jake replied. The terrorists have taken over one section of the station, but they're still connected to all the other sections through the station's systems. Jake explained his plan as he gathered materials. First, I'm going to use the restaurant's pressure system to create steam in Section 7's air vents that will fog up their vision and make it hard for them to see. He connected hoses from the kitchen's steam tables to the air circulation system. Next, I'm going to use the fitness center's electromagnetic equipment to interfere with their energy weapons. Jake and Steve worked together to modify the exercise machines, turning them into electromagnetic pulse generators. The art studio's metal powders can be mixed with the air circulation to create a conductive atmosphere that will disrupt their shields. Sarah helped Jake connect everything to the station's computer system. And finally, I'm going to use the gravity generators to make them too heavy to move quickly. That's brilliant, Steve said. But how do you get close enough to actually rescue the hostages? Jake smiled. That's suicide, Sarah protested. No, Jake said confidently. By the time I walk in there, they won't be able to shoot straight. Their weapons won't work properly. Their shields will be down, and they'll be too heavy to move fast. They'll be helpless. It took Jake 45 minutes to set up all his modifications to the station's systems. Then he walked calmly to the main entrance of Section 7. The terrorists had barricaded the entrance with furniture and metal barriers. Jake pressed the communication button. This is Ambassador Jake Morrison, he said. I want to talk. A harsh voice replied, Stay away, human, or we start killing hostages. I'm unarmed, Jake said. I just want to discuss your demands. We know your tricks. Jake held up his hands where the cameras could see them. No weapons, no backup, no tricks, just me. He activated all his modifications to the station's systems. Steam began pouring into Section 7 through the air vents. The electromagnetic pulse generators started interfering with electronic equipment. Metal particles filled the air, and the gravity in that section increased to twice normal levels. What's happening? Terrorist leader shouted over their communication system. The station is helping me, Jake replied calmly. Jake walked through the main entrance. The steam was so thick that the terrorists could barely see him. Their energy weapons sparked and failed when they tried to fire. Their shields flickered and died. They moved like they were underwater because of the increased gravity. "Surrender now," Jake said, walking slowly toward the hostages. "Your weapons don't work, your shields are down, and you can barely move. But if you give up peacefully, no one gets hurt." The terrorist leader tried to raise his weapon, but it was too heavy in the increased gravity. "This is impossible. Just one unarmed human?" "That's right," Jake said, reaching the hostages and beginning to untie them. 1 week after the terrorist incident, the Grand Galactic Council called an emergency session. This was not a normal meeting about trade or politics. This was a formal hearing to decide the future of human participation in galactic affairs. Jake. Morrison sat in the human section of the council chambers, but today he was not alone. President Helen Carter had traveled from Earth to attend the hearing. Ambassador Tony Lewis, the senior human diplomat in the galaxy, sat beside her. Behind them were representatives from every human colony world. The chamber was more crowded than Jake had ever seen it. Every species in the galaxy had sent representatives. They all wanted to hear what would be decided about the humans in their unique status. High Arbiter Velenith stood at the center of the chamber. His voice filled the enormous space as he spoke. "We are here today to address a question that has puzzled this council for 3 years," he began. "Why are humans the only species permitted to enter these chambers without weapons? Should this exception continue?" A murmur went through the chamber. Some species had complained that humans received special treatment. Others worried that humans were becoming too influential in galactic politics. Before we proceed, the Arbiter continued, "We will hear from representatives of different species about their experiences with humans." The first speaker was War Chief Gruckmer. The massive Algarian stood and addressed the chamber in his deep, rumbling voice. "My people are warriors," he said. "We have fought for thousands of years, understand strength and respect power. When humans first came to the galaxy, we thought they were weak because they had no natural weapons." Grack_Moore looked directly at the human section. "We were wrong. Humans are not weak.
Ow.
They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, precisely because they appear harmless." Shocked sounds came from around the chamber. Several species had not heard this perspective before. "Let me explain," Grack_Moore continued. "When my people fight, we use our claws and our thick skin. When Zephyrians fight, they use their plasma weapons. When Chitara fight, they use their stingers. We all fight with the weapons we were born with." He gestured toward Jake. "But humans fight with everything. They turn spoons into weapons. They use gravity as a tool. They make restaurants into military bases. They do not see objects. They see possibilities." The next speaker was Kretel from the Chitara Collective. Her multiple voices spoke in perfect harmony. "The collective has studied human behavior for 3 years," she said. "We have reached a disturbing conclusion. Humans do not think like other species." She pointed to different sections of the chamber. "Zephyrians think about how to use their claws to solve problems. Vortons think about how to change their shape to overcome obstacles. Vortons think about how to use their strength to break through barriers. But humans," she continued, "think about how to change the problem itself. They do not adapt themselves to fight their environment. They adapt their environment to solve their problems." Kretel's voice became more serious. "This makes them unpredictable. The collective cannot calculate what a human will do next because humans do not follow logical patterns of behavior." Vexter, the Zephyrian ambassador who had almost fought with Kretel a week earlier, stood up next. "I have fought against humans," he hissed, "not in war, but in negotiations. Every time I think I understand their position, they change the rules of the discussion." He looked embarrassed as he continued. "Ambassador Morrison prevented a fight between myself and the Chitara representative. He did this not by taking sides, but by making the fight irrelevant. He created a solution that made both of us winners." Vexter's eyes glowed red with emotion. "This is not normal behavior. Normal species choose sides in conflicts. They pit winners and losers. But humans create new options that did not exist before." Speaker after speaker stood up to share their experiences with humans. The stories were all different, but they had one thing in common. Humans consistently did the unexpected, and it usually worked out better for everyone involved. Finally, High Arbiter Velenoth called on President Carter to speak for humanity. President Carter stood slowly. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but when she spoke, her voice carried authority that filled the chamber. "Honored representatives," she began, "you have heard many theories about why humans behave differently. Let me tell you the simple truth." She walked to the center of the chamber, just as Jake had done during the trade dispute. "Humans are not special because we are stronger or smarter or braver than other species," she said. "We are different because we had to be." President Carter gestured to the armed aliens around her. "Every species in this chamber evolved with natural weapons: claws, fangs, venom, armor, electrical abilities. You were all born ready to fight. Humans were not," she continued. "We evolved on a world full of predators that were bigger, faster, and stronger than us. We had no claws to fight the great cats. We had no thick skin to protect us from the bears. We had no venom to kill the snakes that could kill us." The chamber was completely silent. Every being was listening carefully, so we learned to use tools. President Carter explained. "We picked up rocks to throw at our enemies. We sharpened sticks to hunt with. We made fire to keep warm and scare away dangerous animals." She smiled slightly. "But more importantly, we learned to work together. One human alone was weak and helpless. But a group of humans with tools and a plan could defeat any predator." President Carter's voice grew stronger. "We learned that the most dangerous weapon is not a claw or a fang. It is a mind that can adapt to any situation and find solutions that no one else thought of." Ambassador Lewis stood up to continue the explanation. "Hey, this is why humans are effective as unarmed diplomats," he said. "We are not threatening to other species because we have no visible weapons. But we are respected because everyone knows that. If we needed weapons, we would find a way to make them. When I enter a room with no gun," Lewis explained, "other species put away their guns too. It's not because they are afraid of me, but because they are curious about what I will do instead of fighting." "Curiosity is more powerful than fear," President Carter added. "Fear makes people want to attack first. Curiosity makes people want to wait and see what happens next." High Arbiter Velenoth nodded slowly. "This explains much about human behavior. But it raises another question. Are humans too dangerous to be allowed in council affairs?" The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species seemed worried about human unpredictability. Others seemed fascinated by human problem-solving abilities. President Carter raised her hand for silence. "May I share one final story?" When the chamber was quiet, she continued. "Last month, a plague threatened to destroy the entire population of the Kalari system. The disease was spreading faster than any cure could be developed. Millions of beings were going to die. The Galactic Medical Council spent weeks trying to find a cure using traditional methods. They failed. The plague was unlike anything they had seen before, so they asked for human help," President Carter said. "Not because we have better medical technology, but because we think differently about problems. Our doctors studied the plague for 3 days. They could not cure it either, but they did something else. They changed the question." The chamber leaned forward to hear more. Instead of asking how to cure the plague, she explained, they asked how to make the plague cure itself. They used the plague's own reproductive system to carry medicine instead of disease. They turned the enemy into an ally. The plague was eliminated in 2 weeks, President Carter concluded. Not because humans are better doctors, but because humans are better at changing impossible problems into possible solutions. High Arbiter Vel_Nath stood up again. "The Council will now vote on whether to continue the human exception to our weapons protocols." The vote was not even close. Every species voted to keep the exception. More than that, they voted to expand it. "From this day forward," the Arbiter announced, "the human exception will be formally recognized in Council law. Humans will be permitted to enter all Council facilities without weapons, and they will be given priority in mediating disputes between other species. Furthermore," he continued, "we are establishing a new position, the Human Advisory Council. This group will help other species learn human problem-solving methods." Ours. Jake Morrison felt tears in his eyes as the chamber erupted in applause. Just from the human section, but from every species present? After the vote? Many alien ambassadors approached the human delegation. They all wanted to know the same thing. Could humans teach their people to think more creatively? We can try. President Carter replied to each request. But remember, creativity cannot be taught like a skill. It has to be practiced like a muscle. As the chamber emptied, Jake found himself standing next to War Chief Grak_Moore. Human Jake, the Algarian said. My people have a new saying. It. Is it? Jake asked. Beware the peaceful being who carries no weapon. Grak_Moore replied, for he has made peace itself his greatest weapon. Jake smiled. I like that saying. Good, Grak_Moore said with what might have been a smile, because now the whole galaxy will learn what it means. As Jake walked out of the council chambers for the last time, as just another diplomat, he realized that everything had changed.